24 hours before my 65th birthday, my daughter-in-law stood in my kitchen and told me my party was canceled. She said her mother felt uncomfortable around me. That was the explanation. Her mother had apparently been in tears, and Brooke decided it would be better to keep the peace by calling everything off. My son Julian stood beside her staring at the coffee maker like it held the secrets of the universe. He didn't defend me, didn't even look me in the eye. And in that moment, standing in the kitchen my late husband and I built with our own hands, I realized something that should have hit me years earlier. I wasn't family in that house anymore. I was staff. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just nodded slowly, picked up my tea, and walked out to the backyard. That calm scared me more than anger would have, because something inside me had finally snapped into focus. For 3 years, I'd let Julian and Brooke live upstairs while I slowly disappeared downstairs. First, it was small things. Brooke rearranged the living room because my furniture looked dated. Then my favorite dishes vanished into storage. Then my sewing room became her package room, filled with Amazon boxes and Pilates equipment. Every compromise had sounded temporary, until I looked around one day and realized I was a guest in my own home. That afternoon, I watched Brooke's mother wandering happily through my garden, the same woman who was supposedly too uncomfortable for my birthday dinner to exist. And suddenly I felt something colder than anger. Clarity. I went into my office, locked the door, opened my laptop, and quietly started taking my life back. The next morning, I changed exactly one thing. I stopped helping. Normally, I woke up at 6, cleaned the espresso machine, emptied the dishwasher, picked up fresh bagels, and made breakfast before Julian and Brooke even came downstairs. That morning, I stayed in bed reading a mystery novel. At 8 o'clock, I heard chaos erupt in the kitchen, cabinet doors slamming, the espresso machine sputtering like it was dying, Brooke muttering curses under her breath. Then came the knock. Julian stood there, confused, asking why the coffee machine wasn't working and whether breakfast was almost ready. I smiled pleasantly and told him I was changing my routine. I mentioned the espresso machine probably needed descaling and the manual was in the junk drawer. He blinked at me like I'd suddenly started speaking Italian. 10 minutes later, they rushed out the door without breakfast. I wandered downstairs afterward and found the kitchen looking like a crime scene. Coffee grounds everywhere, dirty mugs, open cabinets. Usually I would cleaned it immediately. Instead, I moved one plate aside so I could make tea and left the rest exactly where it was. Then I opened my banking app. Every month, I transferred $1,500 into the household account Brooke used for groceries and house expenses. Somehow those groceries mostly included imported cheese, organic wine, and expensive little crackers I never touched. I canceled the transfer, no announcement, no fight, just one quiet click. Then I drove into the city to tour a condo. The moment I walked into that apartment, I knew. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A small sunny patio. No stairs, no tension, no feeling like I needed permission to breathe. For the first time in years, I felt light. That evening, Brooke stormed into the living room carrying grocery bags with fury written all over her face. Her card had been declined at the store. She asked if I'd forgotten to refill the account. I looked up calmly from my knitting and told her that from now on, I'd only be covering my own groceries. After all, I mostly cooked and ate alone anyway. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then came the line that almost made me laugh. She said they worked very hard, and I lived there rent-free. I set my knitting down carefully and corrected her. No, dear, I own the house. You live here rent-free. Silence, the kind that burns. She spun around and stormed upstairs. The next morning, I reclaimed another piece of my life. There was a guest room downstairs Brooke had unofficially converted into storage for her shopping addiction. Boxes, shoes, decorative pillows still in plastic wrap. I moved every single item into the hallway. Then I carried my books, easel, and painting supplies into the room and locked the door. When Brooke nearly tripped over the boxes later that afternoon, she shrieked for Julian. He came to me trying to sound diplomatic, asking if I could be more considerate because Brooke needed space for her hobbies. I smiled sweetly. So do I. Then I walked outside and started pruning my roses. That was the moment Brooke realized the ground beneath her feet was shifting. And honestly, so did Julian. A few days later, I signed the lease on the condo. That same afternoon, I transferred the utility bills out of my name: electricity, water, gas, internet, all of it. When I came home, Julian was standing in the hallway, holding a stack of bills like they were written in another language. He asked if there'd been a mistake. I hung up my coat and told him calmly that since he and Brooke used most of the house, it made sense for them to cover the expenses. He looked stunned. Not angry. Stunned. Because somewhere along the way, my son had gotten so used to being carried that he genuinely forgot adulthood cost money. Brooke screamed something upstairs about me being selfish. I ignored her completely. By then, my spirit had already moved out. Over the next 2 weeks, I packed quietly. Not with giant dramatic boxes, small ones, the kind no one notices, photo albums. Legal documents, jewelry, my late husband's watch collection. The cashmere sweaters Brooke kept borrowing. Every morning while Brooke was at Pilates and Julian was at work, I loaded my trunk and drove things to the condo. The house slowly became emptier. Neither of them noticed. But they did notice the money disappearing. Julian awkwardly approached me twice asking if I could maybe still help with internet or insurance. I offered to cancel my portion of the Wi-Fi since I mostly read books anyway. That ended the conversation quickly. Brooke responded differently. Petty warfare. One Saturday, she invited friends over for brunch in my garden without asking permission. Loud laughter. Mimosa glasses everywhere, like she was planting a flag. I simply grabbed my purse and left for a cafe downtown. Because by then, the house no longer felt like my battlefield. It felt like a property I happened to own. And then came the moment that truly convinced me I was making the right decision. Monday morning, Brooke sat at the kitchen table, excitedly planning a massive birthday party for her mother. The same mother whose discomfort had erased my own 65th birthday. Caterers, decorations, champagne towers, all scheduled for Saturday at my house. Then Brooke smiled brightly and informed me she'd need the downstairs and garden all weekend. She even suggested I stay somewhere else Saturday night, so everyone could relax. Julian looked nervous waiting for my reaction. But I just smiled warmly and said that sounded perfect, because I wouldn't be home that weekend anyway. Brooke thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally pushed me out of the house completely. What she didn't know was that I'd already hired movers for Friday morning and signed paperwork with a property management company. I wasn't selling the house. I was turning it into income. Friday arrived. At S-sharp, Julian and Brooke left for work. Brooke reminded me not to forget the liquor delivery for her party. The second their car disappeared, the moving truck pulled up. Within an hour, my remaining furniture was gone. My bed, my desk, my armchair, my husband's old bookshelf, the rooms echoed. I cleaned everything carefully, then placed one thick envelope in the center of the kitchen table. Inside was a formal notice from the management company. It explained that I had officially moved out and the property would now operate as a rental. Julian and Brooke had two choices: pay market rent, $3,200 a month, or vacate within 90 days. Utilities and maintenance were now entirely their responsibility. I left my house keys on top of the envelope. Then I signed for Brooke's liquor delivery, stacked the boxes neatly in the garage, grabbed my coat, and walked out the front door. No speech, no screaming match, just silence and freedom. That night, sitting in my new condo with a glass of Cabernet, I finally checked my phone. 18 missed calls from Julian, 6 from Brooke. The text started confused and slowly descended into panic. Brooke accused me of ruining her mother's party. Julian just kept writing one thing: "Mom, please call." I didn't answer. The next morning, I sat on my patio drinking coffee while sunlight poured across the floor. And somewhere across town, chaos was unfolding. Because without me, their carefully curated lifestyle collapsed almost instantly. They couldn't afford the house, couldn't afford the utilities, couldn't even manage the party properly. The catering arrived late. Nobody knew how to use the double oven. Brooke's mother left early, furious and embarrassed. For years, I had quietly carried the weight of their lives so smoothly they forgot the weight existed. Now they were finally feeling it. A few days later, Julian showed up at my condo. He looked exhausted, older, like reality had aged him in one weekend. I opened the door, but I didn't invite him inside. He told me they couldn't afford the rent, said they were family, said I should come home. Home. That word almost broke my heart, because I realized something tragic. The house had stopped feeling like home long before I left it. I crossed my arms and told him calmly that being family doesn't mean being someone's unpaid servant and personal ATM. I told him he was a grown man, and grown men pay bills. If they couldn't afford the house, they'd need to find something smaller. Just like I had. He stared at me quietly for a long moment. And for the first time in years, I think my son actually saw me clearly. Not as background support, not as endless help, but as a woman with limits, with dignity, with worth. Eventually, he nodded and walked away. It hurt. Of course it hurt. You never stop loving your child. But love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And I was finally done destroying myself to make other people comfortable. 2 months later, Julian and Brooke moved into a modest apartment they could actually afford. My management company found wonderful tenants for the house, and the rent checks started arriving every month like clockwork. Peacefully, quietly, like justice usually does. On my 66th birthday, I sat on my sunny terrace with 3 close friends and an outrageously expensive chocolate cake. No tension, no criticism, no walking on eggshells, just peace. Julian called that afternoon. He sounded different, still tired, but steadier somehow. More adult. We kept the conversation short and polite. Not a movie reconciliation. Not some dramatic, tearful apology. Just the beginnings of something healthier. Brooke still doesn't speak to me. And honestly, that might be the greatest gift she ever gave me. Because I finally learned something at 65 that I should learned much earlier. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes strength is simply refusing to carry people who would let you collapse beneath them. I didn't ruin their lives. I just stopped financing the illusion they were entitled to mine. Now every morning, I sit beside my window with my tea and look out at the park below my condo. The silence feels warm instead of lonely, and every single day I feel the same thing, relief. Because I'm no longer a background character in somebody else's perfect little story. For the first time in years, I'm finally living my own.